Naruto blinked, frowned in disbelief, squinted hard now as he beheld the sordid mess before him. What in the hells did I miss? To his credit, he and Nimriia had returned to Casterly Rock with all due haste in the hopes of quietly quelling any dissent that might have fermented in their absence. He was used to the chaos, expecting it even given their unceremonious departure. And some of it he had been able to predict. Tywin father, for instance, had asked to speak with him later, while Joanna merely looked at him and Nimriia and just smiled. Hiding was fruitless there. Mothers always knew what you were up to. They were scary like that. To be fair, he'd not seen neither hide nor hair of Tyrion as of the moment, but perhaps that too was for the best. He wanted his little brother to remain innocent of such things a little while longer. Alas, in all his years he'd not been prepared for this. Anticipated it? Yes. Prepared for it? Nope. How did one prepare for this sort of thing anyway? Answer, you do not. For you cannot, truth be told, Eid expected something else altogether. Instead they found this strange sight awaiting him in his bedroom, rather the three of them sitting upon his bed in varying states of disarray. Lyanna's beautiful blue dress was ripped near the shoulder to expose a hastily bandaged cut there. Cersei bore a bruise of lively purple and black on her cheek, while Elia was nursing a split lip with a bloody handkerchief. Of Oberyn and Tyrion there was no sign. Wise of them. They must have got while the getting was good. He couldn't blame them because the girls didn't even seem to notice him. They were too busy glaring at each other. They were not nice glares. Too sharp, too angry, promising pain to one another at the least, outright murder at the worst. Judging by their injuries, they must have had a fight of some sort while he was away. Ordinarily, that wouldn't have troubled him whatsoever. People fought all the time, noble ladies more than most. Best to let them air their grievances and be done with it, right? Wrong. He might just be marrying Lyanna once this mess was over. His feelings for Elia were still something of a mystery, and Cersei, none on it going the Rarightno. No matter how good she looked in that crimson dress of hers, heresy, foul treachery, from his own mind no less. For a wild moment he thought about just backing the hells up, easing the door shut and simply not dealing with this today. He was sore, sleepy, really needed to have word with Rayla in his dreams, come to think of it, and he had an attack to plan. Too late they saw him. There you are. Cersei spoke first, idly noticing a silent Nimriia at his side. Brought her back into the fold, have you? I have. He hedged warily, not liking the look in her eyes for a moment. What did I miss? Oh, nothing. Elia tossed her head, flicking a strand of dark hair out her eyes. We simply had a little talk, Lyanna said. Just the three of us. Cersei seconded her. A very enthusiastic talk. Seems like more than a talk to me. Elia blinked. Does it? They were trying very hard to play innocent about something. But what exactly? They'd clearly gotten into a fight, but what would they possibly be fighting over? Oh, it would have to be him, wouldn't it? He couldn't think of anything else that would rouse the three of them to violence so swiftly. Unless they'd simply decided to start thumping one with training weapons for no reason while he was away. Unbloody likely. Cersei granted him a grim grin. You must be seeing things, little brother. He scowled at his smug sister. You've got a bruise on your face, Elia sniffed. We haven't the foggiest idea what you mean. And you have a split lip. Lyanna opened her mouth to refute that. Not a word form you? He jabbed a finger her way and snarled her into silence. The three of you are going to sit and allow yourselves to be healed. Do you understand? Credit where it was due, Cersei and Elia knew better than to protest. Not so Lyanna, she had to be stubborn. I'm fine, my love, really. It's just a scratch Naruto drew on the natural energy in the air, yanked it inward, and made his eyes gleam gold. Do you understand? Nimriia hid a giggle behind her hand. Perhaps you should let them keep their injuries. After all, they've clearly claimed that they have none. Nim, he chastised her under his breath, not the time. Oops, they noticed that. Or rather, Lyanna did. Lyanna idly noticed the nickname. In the same moment she noticed Nimriia lingering close by his side, closer than usual. She had returned, it seemed. That was good, she supposed. Nathaniel had been most morose without her, but she was standing awfully close to him, almost leaning against him. Wait. Suddenly concerned, she peered closer at the pair, and while there were no overt signs of foul play present, she knew. She didn't know how or why, or when, only that she did. Although Nimriia wore yet another of her many faces, the faceless girl's eyes were half-lidded with smoldering smugness, her cheeks pleasantly flushed, her posture at ease and well-relaxed. She favored her right leg over her left for once as well, which seemed rather unusual for one normally so fleet of foot. All signs pointed to the obvious. Call it a woman's intuition. And right now, Lyanna's intuition told her that they were, all of them, currently fighting for second place. She was merely the first to realize it. Already Cersei and Elia were staring her way. Perhaps they knew or merely suspected the truth. Regardless, it didn't change the facts. That sneaky bitch. Small wonder Nathaniel had convinced Nimriia to return. He'd lain with her. Multiple times, by all likelihood, the realization stung. Less than Lyanna thought it would. Oh, it still wounded her, make no mistake. And she was going to get Nathaniel for that, but it more a warning to hurry the hells up lest she be left in the dust. She couldn't even blame Nathaniel for what he'd done. He was a young man, and all men had their urges. Nimriia was, by rights, the safest option by which to sate his carnal desires with little risk involved. She herself had the prospect of children to fear for, and while there was always the option of moon tea, accidents were known to happen. She'd no desire to bear a child out of wedlock. Such would dishonor her house and result in her bearing a bastard. Nimriia had no such obligations, and by all rights, she'd known him much longer. Truly, it was miracle she hadn't jumped Nathaniel's bones before now, and due in no small part to neither of them realizing their feelings for one another. But now they had, hadn't they? It seemed so obvious now in hindsight. She saw it in the way Nim hovered over Nathaniel as he tended first to Elia's bloodied lip, the act of which drew a startled gasp from the Martell princess. The way in which she would occasionally glance his way as he healed Cersei's bruise, her brow furrowing as the older Lannister gasped and squirmed under her brother's ministrations. All the while she stood closer than ever before, ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation, not solely out of duty, not anymore, but rather love, seeing it hurt. It hurt an awful lot. This hurt, it hurt Ithertsodom Ned much. Of all of them, it seemed only Nimriia was truly free to do as she pleased, when she pleased, how she pleased. It made her so wretchedly jealous. When it came time for Nathaniel to heal her, Lyanna barely noticed. He asked permission, she muttered her assent and held out her arm, ready to have this over with, find her cot and sulk. She could and likely would be angry later. Right now she just wanted to be alone with her own thoughts and cry. She was of the North, she was proud, she was strong. She would not let something like this break her, no matter how much it might hurt Yao. At his touch, a warm tingle shot down her wounded limb and pooled in her chest, drawing a startled gasp from her. What was this sensation? It didn't stop at her bosom. His healing hand sought out other unseen bruises, mending her every ache and pain garnered in today's spar, one by one. She allowed it, still cross with him, but began to relax as he spoke to her ever so softly, asking her how she was, how she'd been, how she felt, until slowly but surely, like an unwound knot, her anger came undone. Unlike his time with Cersei and Elia, he didn't stop at mending her arm. He touched her delicately yet expertly, fingers stroking her sore shoulders through her dress in slow, rhythmic circles until he gradually reached her back, followed by her ribs, then her hips. His strong yet so supple fingers dug into her muscles to render both her thoughts and her body a gooey mess. Oh, that felt rather nice. Very nice, really. In the wake of his touch came a strange, giddy euphoria, leaving her swaying where she sat. Nathaniel didn't give her time to savor it. He'd already gone on the attack. Without pausing, he dared to lift both her legs and rub her sore feet, and when working the kinks out of her toes didn't satisfy her fully, he went to work on her calves with dexterous aplomb. Next came her thighs, where she'd pulled a great many muscles. Muscles, those things. She'd pulled a great many muscles, hadn't she? She could see why Elia and Cersei made those noises now. This was heaven. It felt rather nice. Downright tingly, really. Among things. Her breath hitched at the thought as he touched her again, and she became as putty in his hands. With only a little prodding on his part, he had her sprawled out on her stomach upon the bed, arms tucked under her chin. Undaunted by what appeared to be a most compromising position, he deftly sat atop her legs and began to dug his thumbs into her lower back, followed by her hindquarters, leaving her pleasantly numb. And then, not so numb at all. She shivered and bit at a fist to stifle a groan of relief, then pleasure as her senses spiked, to no avail. Her back arched a little despite her best efforts to maintain control, all for naught. Oh gods, it felt like she was about to. Distantly, she aware of Cersei and Elia staring, eyes wide and faces red as she cried out in blessed release. But in her blissful haze, she couldn't bring herself to care for their jealousy. He'd probably have them gasping his name soon enough, but she got to experience this first. What did he call this technique again? A back rub? No, that wasn't the right word. A massage? Yes, that was it. By the gods, it felt goo-wooed. This was better than sex. I'm sorry for upsetting you. Nathaniel leaned down to whisper in her ear, lips brushing her outer lobe as he continued his masterful ministrations. I'll explain later. Hopefully this makes up for it. Yes, explaining sounded nice. Loud explaining, noisy explaining, preferably tonight. That settled things now, didn't it? His massage had done much to curtail her worries, but not all of them. Still swimming in a pleasurable haze, she made up her mind and cast a glance Nimriia's way. The faceless girl-woman wore the sweetest smile. They were already at war, but now it was personal. A girl was smug. Smug, sore, and spent. Nimriia luxuriated in the feeling as she lounged in her cot. For once, she didn't have to guard Nathaniel. He was perfectly safe meeting with his father, which in turn gave her rare leave to lay back in bed and just breathe. Inhale, exhale, revel in her most heady triumph, it felt. Rather nice, actually, winning. She luxuriated in the feeling almost as much as the silk sheets rubbing against her bare skin. What? She liked so sleep in such a manner. Such was her way, had been for quite some time now. Bereft of both clothes and her many faces, she stared up at the slate-gray ceiling of her quarters, clasped both hands behind her head and took a moment to contemplate her victory. She wasn't all that surprised by the Stark's reaction. She had not. Well, she had not intended to take Nathaniel's first time, or his second. And third, she simply hadn't been able to help herself. Having discovered the rare pleasures of the flesh, she found herself craving them all the more. She might have taken care in the future, lest she lose herself to it. Regardless of her feelings on the subject, Lady Stark wouldn't be in any position to demand answers from her any time soon. Nor would Lady Lannister and Lady Martell for that matter. They had, each of them, demanded a massage after Lyanna had her turn naturally. They wouldn't be walking about any time soon. Perhaps she should ask for one of those as well. But no, she much rather preferred the sex. Her face warmed as she rose. Here at last she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Confusion dawned. Her violet-gray eyes widened, bulged now in disbelief. She'd not had a chance to look at herself since returning to the rock. In truth, she simply hadn't felt the need. Nathaniel's healing ministrations hadn't gone unnoticed last night, but she'd paid them little heed, thinking he was merely healing the worst of the scars on her breasts and shoulders. She was both right, and so very wrong. Because you see, it was gone, vanished. Her facial scar was nowhere to be seen. She sat up, scrubbed at her eyes with both hands, but the scene before her did not change. That ghastly mark that had once carved the length of her true face was now nowhere to be seen, as though it never existed at all. She made a small hysterical noise, momentarily unable to believe it. So that was what he'd done last night. Nimriia began to laugh. Still laughing, she moved to don one of her few dresses, a long, lovely thing in golden Lannister, read herself before the mirror, then spun about for good measure, pale hair lofting about her head like some holy halo. Her reflection preened back at her as she came to stop, proud as a peacock. She looked like a proper princess, even if she would never truly be one. She could take solace in that, at least. The door opened behind her, and she jolted as Joanna Lannister herself entered the room. A girl wasn't prepared to face Nathaniel's mother. Lady Lannister? Thankfully, the older woman looked like she'd seen a ghost herself. You look just like Rayla now, Nimriia sputtered in quiet confusion. The queen? What did she have to do with this? A girl does not understand. A look of anguish flashed across the Lannister matriarch's face before she shook her head. Never mind. With one hand, Lord Tywin's wife closed the door behind her and locked it for good measure. Nimriia eyed her warily, wishing she had a knife. Did you need something? A wan smile was her only reward. I had hoped we might talk. About poor Nathaniel, no doubt. If that is your desire. Joanna glided into the room, hands clasped before her golden gown. A perfunctory inspect of her surrounds followed before she sat on Nimriia's bed, leaving her with no choice but to stand. The power play wasn't lost on her. Nobles were often like that. Master was the only one she'd ever understood, and he baffled her sometimes. His mother mystified her. My son cares for you a great deal. Speak carefully now. He does, my lady. Joanna stared at her for a long moment. You've been with him. Nimriia contemplated lying, then thought better of it at the last. I have. When? Recently, she retorted instantly, lifting her chin. Last night, then? Joanna nodded softly to herself, as though confirming something she'd silently suspected all along. Good. Had you lied, I would have cut out your tongue. Nimriia did not quail. She'd long since grown inured to such violent threats. Instead, she raised her chin higher and stared her down. A girl is nothing if not honest. So you are. Lady Lannister shook her head. If only she could see you now. Would she be proud, I wonder, or would she hate you? But the lady was still speaking, and she must attend her. Be good to him, Nimriia, and if you betray him, Quick as a flash, Joanna burst to her feet and crossed the distance between them to seize her by the face. She pinched both cheeks viciously, fingernails biting into her recently healed visage. "Nothing in the world will save you," she hissed at her. "I would sooner die than harm him," Joanna released her. "I believe you. One more question. How sharp are those knives of yours?" "Have you gotten rusty?" Her smile proved just as sharp. "A girl has not." "Good, then I have a task for you. You seem satisfied." Naruto didn't look up from the battle map. "I suppose I am. Finally brought that faceless girl of yours back into the fold, did you?" A muscle jumped in his jaw, quietly quelled. On a certain level, he knew Tywin was trying to goad him, the better to measure his reaction. He didn't begrudge him for it. Such was simply his way. Even so, he couldn't quite conceal a prickle of irritation at the dismissive tone he'd used just now, like she didn't exist, didn't matter. Her name is Nimriia. For some reason, that made Tywin laugh, a rare, genuine sound. "Good, remember that and do not lose sight of her again." Confusion had him looking up from the plan he'd sketched out, hiding his confusion behind another glass of wine. Did the old man know? No, surely not. Keep her close. Tywin took a brief drink of his own, paused now, as their eyes meeting his over the rim of his goblet. "That woman will give you strong children." "Lannister children." Naruto nearly choked on his wine. "Stop that." His sire chided him as he coughed for air. "Even I was young once. Nimriia is loyal, if not to House Lannister, then to you. Beyond that, I trust her to be discreet. Nothing else matters. Now about this latest scheme of yours, I must protest." He traced a finger along the fleet of ships he'd arrayed across the table. "Even you cannot walk on water." Naruto's strained grimace became a beatific grin. Couldn't walk on water, eh? How little he knew. The Stark forces arrived just in time. Only 2 days before the Greyjay fleet was set to arrive, a mighty column of men reached the gates of Casterly Rock. Some of the Northmen grumbled at the idea of helping Westerners. That much was to be expected. Still, they were Northerners, they kept their word, and the Greyjays were an old enemy. For a wolf, the Kraken seemed as good a foe as any. Lyanna saw the man standing at the head of the column, leading them. She leaped into his arms with a delighted cry. "Father!" Lord Rickard Stark caught her with a startled grunt, laughing but a little. "Come, there is much we must discuss." The Greyjay fleet sailed into Lannisport under cover of darkness. They were well prepared for those foolish Krakens, all of them. From his hideaway in the docks, Naruto considered them intently, watching as they drew closer. "Ready?" Nimeria's chin came down over his shoulder, her leather armor creaking ever so softly against his own. Always, since making peace with Nimriia, he noticed her more often, strange as that might sound. She wasn't always at his side directly, but when she was, she no longer shied away. She'd found her confidence. Good. She'd be needing every bit of it tonight. A unique variant of hidden mist jutsu on his part had likewise emboldened the Greyjays. Doubtless they thought themselves safe under the fog. How little they knew. It was almost sad, truly. "Did you bring your mask?" "A girl has it." She held up the item he'd made for her, carved from darkest night and fiery paint, shaped in the likeness of a snarling dragon. He had one himself, fashioned by his own hands of black and red ceramic carved into the horrific shape of a roaring lion. Proper spooky, he thought. For the invaders, it would be terrifying. Kurama and Shukaku had a good laugh over that one. Shame they wouldn't be joining them in this battle. But now was not the time for such things. Reaching behind his back, he drew his great black blow. It was an absolute monster of a weapon, nearly as large as he was tall when full drawn. From there he held out his hand, and Nimriia placed 3 arrows into it, large, bulky things with strange cylinders affixed to where the arrowhead should be. He knocked 3 of them to heavy string, grunting as he drew it back fully. Such an act was difficult even for him, but he managed. Pushed chakra into them now and let them fly. Each soared into the air silent as a whisper. Even as they flew, he flung out a hand, and Nimriia gave him 3 more, each loosed after the last. As for what followed, well, that proved telling. The Greyjays never stood a chance. It was not Wildfire Ares jealously kept that under lock and key, but it didn't have to be. He'd created a marvelous substance of his own. He called it blast powder. In the centuries that followed, it would become known by a far different name. Gunpowder. It would change the world. But for now, Naruto merely let another explosive arrow fly. It was akin to firing a Rokutan-apt comparison, not that he knew what such a thing was. The explosion was massive, not only that it ignited the mist in a fiery cloud of napalm, immolating a vessel outright. This mist was no mere mist after all, but filled with explosive chemicals. Flammable materials all. Lots of things that went boom, discovered after a great many days of experimentation. Unsatisfied with the yield, he loosed another arrow after the second, sending it streaking forward in a fiery missile of death. It struck a longship's hull and detonated explosively, blasting a massive hole in the craft. The vessel floundered and began to take on water, still struggling forward, until he loosed another arrow, followed by another, yet another, another. By the time he was finished, 3 craft were disabled and a score more were well on their way to sinking. Time for the grand finale. He yanked on his mask, drew his weapons, and strode across the water, hollering at the top of his lungs, chakra warping his voice into something horrific. As he spoke, he reached out with said chakra to weave quite possibly the most powerful killing intent-based genjutsu he'd ever created. R.I.P. Antir. There is something to be said for the brute force approach. The men on those ships did not see a young man in a mask. They beheld a towering terror, a creature straight from nightmare, a beast conjured forth of their worst fears. Blood for the blood god! He fell into the act completely, menacing them with rich peals of raucous laughter. Skulls for the skull throne, fly UFOOLS, I shall reap your souls. When faced with what they thought to be a demon from the mist, the Greyjoys reacted much as he knew they would. Like the cowards they were, they bolted for land. The surviving longships rowed like mad to make it to shore. Naruto gave chase, cackling all the while, for it was there that Starks and Lannisters awaited them with drawn blades. Henceforth, this battle would gain a horrifying moniker. The Night of Bones. Lyanna looked lovely. It was a relief to see, for until this very moment, Lord Rickard Stark had been concerned for his daughter, as any true father worth his salt would be. He had feared that she might suffer away from the north, that she would wither in the west, away from the cold and her people. But apparently his fears had been for naught. She stood strong and radiant and proud, veritably beaming beside Nathaniel in the war room as she helped him point out the enemy formation. That and where they would intercept them. She did not cling to his arm as some mewling, lovelorn maiden might, but remained at her intended side as an equal, meeting him eye for eye as they vigorously debated the nuances of some plan he didn't wholly understand. Hard to believe she'd all but leaped into his arms only a short while ago at the gate. Such was but a part of his reason for coming to Casterly Rock, not only to personally check in on his daughter, but to ascertain Lord Lannister's intentions as well. That said, he'd brought the better part of 5,000 men west within. More than enough to repel the impending attack on Lannisport, beat back the raiders to the sea, then lay waste to the Iron Islands. It would not be a swift battle. He expected it to take time, perhaps a year. He'd also left a garrison behind at Winterfell, spread out should the worst come to pass. No matter his concerns, he could not entirely strip the north of all defenses lest Ares take it into his head to do something foolish, which he just might. One never knew with the mad dragon. Forewarned is forearmed and all that. It also gave him an opportunity to meet the Warden of the West face to face. He had heard tales of Tywin Lannister, exchanged letters with him, and shared correspondence in the past, but this was his first time meeting the man in the flesh. How best to describe him? Stern, severe, stoic. All those words seemed insufficient when meeting a monster of his caliber. This man had carved his family's legacy in gold and blood, and would for all the years he had left. But just as Tywin Lannister remained Warden of the West, so too was Rickard Stark Warden of the North. They were equals, if not necessarily in stature, then in rank at the very least. He was not cowed by him any more than he would be a dangerous beast, but he acknowledged his presence nevertheless. As did Tywin himself, it seemed. Lord Stark! The older man granted him a grim nod, a curt acknowledgment between allies. We were not expecting you. He caught the question between the words. Why are you here? So that was how it would be then. Very well. He might disdain the realm's precious Game of Thrones as a whole, but he could play it well enough when pressed. Someone needed to lead the Northmen. He ran a hand across the map, tracing the image of Lannisport with one finger. And besides, I wish to ascertain the status of my daughter. If his words were just a touch frosty, none in the room dared comment. Your daughter is just fine, Lyanna huffed, preening just a little. Though she appreciates your presence. Was that a smile on Nathaniel's face, or perhaps a trick of the light? They at least seemed glad to have him here. What's to be our plan of attack then? Tywin's son and heir perked up, warming to the change as a lion with the sun. The Greyjoy fleet has taken its time reaching Lannisport, raiding up and down the coast wherever they wish. Nathaniel swept a hand across the map, indicating a score of finely carved pieces that served as ships. They think us unprepared. We are not. The key is to draw them in here, and then once they've committed themselves, we'll spring a trap of our own. There he went with his schemes again, that clever boy of Tywin's. And that must be Cersei Lannister standing silently at his other side, listening with rapt attention. A most comely young woman, one who knew how to use a blade, judging by the sword belt she wore. Perhaps Ned might like her. Benjen was still much too young, and besides, Brandon was far too smitten with that Tully girl of his. Would that he could cool his head, he might have brought him here to learn the ways of war, rather than secret him away in Riverrun. Wouldn't do for his heir to rush off and get himself killed. Unbidden, he found his gaze drawn back to Cersei Lannister. She was staring at him. The girl looked fierce. Yes, Ned might make a good match for her. Then again, did he truly want to wed two of his children to the Lannisters? Lyanna and Nathaniel go on well enough, but who was to say Ned and Cersei would? Ah, but he digressed. They were looking to him for an answer, to which he grimaced. My men are not skilled in naval warfare. It'll be difficult enough getting them into ships to burn the Iron Islands. They'll be useless in a pitched battle on the water. They needn't be, Nathaniel chimed. We'll have them waiting to entrap them on the shore with our forces after I drive them there with blast powder. Blast powder. His brow furrowed, but he didn't give voice to the words. And what manner of trap is this? Perhaps sensing his concern, Lord Tywin sighed. It doesn't involve your daughter if that is your fear. She is family. She'll not come to harm here. As though that explained everything in the blood world. An awful thought occurred to him just then. Have they already been wed? Cersei went red. Nathaniel choked on his wine. Lyanna absolutely sputtered. Father! No! With but a single word, Tywin Lannister brought silence and calm back to the room. Weddings are for times of peace. We are currently at war. He looked down to the map and offered a rare sigh of annoyance. I suspect we shall be at war for quite some time. Good. Tywin possessed more honor than he'd initially surmised. He hadn't thought the man might try something in his absence, but these were perilous times, and much blood would soon be shed. Not just with the Greyjoys, but the Targaryens as well, though that conflict would come afterwards. He wondered how large that little red dragon had grown since he'd seen him last. With the Starks and Lannisters working together, the Greyjoys wouldn't last the year. And then, with a little luck, the Targaryens would follow soon thereafter. He remembered asking Lyanna earlier, "He has treated you well." Her face had gone rosy. Very well. He studied his daughter once more as the strategy session evolved into further plans and countermeasures against the Greyjoys. Lyanna offered a few ideas of her own, means that had many nodding and Nathaniel all but beaming with pride. Rickard was no stranger to having loved her mother very dearly, and Lyanna looked to be very much in love. But for now there were plans to make. He could put the fear of the old gods into the boy later, if there was a later. No, none of that. He could not afford to die. The North needed him. Steeling himself, he fixed Nathaniel with a quizzical look. Now what's this about blast powder? Stop pacing and go to sleep already. Easier said than done, he supposed. Saying the words aloud should have helped. If anything, they only made him all the more restless. Naruto exhaled heavily, hands clasped behind his back as he considered his bed. It called to him, yet he couldn't bring himself to rest. His mind was still whirling with fresh thoughts and schemes, of plans that might yet go wrong, comrades that might die, and so much more. He'd gathered all the resources he could, had allies aplenty, fortified defenses, but there was still a chance something might go wrong, and he was left to contemplate it alone. Cersei had gone down to pray in the stone garden. Nimriia had wandered off, wanting a world with Elia. She'd said something about poisons. He didn't dare ask what the little or not so little anymore he supposed Blackfire was up to. Something told him ignorance as bliss on that front just this once. As for Lyanna, well, he didn't rightly know where she was, speaking with her father, probably. Sleep would have been nice, at least then he could talk with Rayla. It had been some time since he'd spoken with the rejuvenated queen. She was probably growing restless. Not for lack of trying on his part. He simply hadn't had uninterrupted sleep nor the chance to reach her in his dreams as of late. All the more reason to corner her and talk, the sooner the better. Did she know about the Greyjoys? And if so, why hadn't she warned him? Ares was seldom the subtle sort. There must be some trace, some sign he could trace back to the Mad King. And then what? Even through layers of rock and stone, Kurama's voice was still able to pierce his mind as no dagger could. She's not at fault for this. I know she isn't. He bit his thumb in mild consternation. But if we had some forewarning, we could have been better prepared. Crakehall's been burned, and it's a miracle the raiders haven't made it to Cornfield yet. They're focused on us, then? Most likely, meaning they may know about me. It was a possibility, he supposed. They could hardly keep him and Shukaku safe forever. Sooner or later, someone was going to notice the dragons, and that was assuming he didn't take the other 7 under his proverbial wing. Could he sense them? Was it possible? He'd never though to try, but then again, there had never been the need. Maybe he ought to try, but that presented a different sort of risk. Because once he knew where they were, he'd feel compelled to seek them out, shelter them, save them. Someone knocked on the door, diverting his thoughts. He was grateful for the distraction, if only because he hadn't bothered to lock it. Clasping both hands behind his back, he straightened himself up, rose to his full towering height and lifted his chin to speak. "Come," the door swung open, his eyes widened. Lyanna! Now wasn't this a familiar sight? The last time she'd visited him in the dead of night like this was way back in Winterfell. That hadn't been on the eve of battle, mind you, but he found himself drawing comparisons all the same. This time she more little more than a thin white shift. The garment clung to her, hinting, tempting, drawing the eye. But why would she wear something like this unless— Oh, she eased the door shut behind her and locked it for good measure. Before he could finish, she stepped into him, her mouth met his halfway, lips caging his. She kissed him slowly, sweetly, lips lingering over his own. "I had to see you," she murmured, pressing herself against him. "I will not be left behind." He almost smiled against her lips. "No one is leaving you behind." "No," she bridled, terribly cross. "Then why does it feel as though every lady in this castle has gotten a leg up on me as of late? Naruto saw the bait but didn't rise to it. Elia brought you a dragon. Nimriia is your blade. Meanwhile, Cersei is." She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't want to talk about her, and that's to say nothing of your dragon queen." She'd figured that out, had she? He wasn't surprised. Lyanna had ever been the clever sort. "We've only exchanged letters." And dreams, he added silently, but that was one secret he wasn't willing to share just yet. "She provides me with insight." "But what do I provide you?" Lyanna slapped a hand against her bosom with a cry. "What do I have?" Her plea floored him for a moment, then he rallied. "You were my first love," and it was true. Nimriia might have been his first ally, but he'd fallen for Lyanna before her. She'd won his heart with his wild ways, and while there would always be others, there could be no doubting his affections for this wild wolf girl who'd slashed and clawed and torn her way into his good graces. He cherished her truly. She'd become his friend, then his confidant, then the woman he wanted to marry. He adored her. That would never change, no matter what anyone said. Not your first time, though. She was clearly still sulking about Nimriia, he could tell, but he had her attention. "Do you really love me?" He cupped her cheek and pressed his forehead to hers. "What kind of question is that? Of course I love you, you know I do." She backed away from him suddenly and reached up to her shoulders. Naruto hissed out a breath. "Hold on a second," Lyanna most assuredly did not. "Prove it, prove it." Lyanna dropped her dress. It pooled at her feet as she exposed herself to him fully. She'd not worn undergarments baring her breasts to him and more, exposing herself fully to Nathaniel seemingly without a care in the world. A lie. In truth, she cared very much what he thought. Daring to step forward, she took a hold of his hands, leaned up, and kissed his neck. "Tell me you love me," she whispered, nuzzling him. "Tell me you want me." Nathaniel didn't falter, but he did sigh. "I do love you, and I want you very much so," he amended when she made to protest. "But now isn't a good time. Hells, this isn't a good idea in the first place." Lyanna nearly recoiled, stung. He was just looking after her, she knew. "I don't care, I'll drink moon tea. Your bloody father's in the castle," she growled. "I don't care. We might be heard, I do not care." Taking a hold of his face with both hands, she dragged his visage down to hers. He allowed it, despite being several times stronger than she, and kissed her deeply. She held him there for a long moment, refusing to release him until she made herself and her feelings abundantly clear to the brash blonde before her. Quite suddenly, he responded to her, not in actions but deeds. She gasped a little when he returned her affections, then again now when his fingers delved past her stomach. "Paused now. Go on." She prodded him, face burning, forcing herself to vocalize what she felt deep within. "I want you to touch me." And he did. Nathaniel wasn't a virgin, she'd known that, but it became abundantly clear. His fingers danced over her body, caressing the nipples of her breasts, teasing a pleased sigh from her, then a moan now as he traced trails of fire across her body. Her thoughts fizzled as he coaxed her body to new heights. Teased, tempted, tormented. Stop, should stop, they must stop. Lyanna didn't want to stop. Why would she ever want to stop this? Being with him made her feel good and powerful and strong. How could something like this possibly be wrong? She pushed him back to the bed, climbed into his lap, planted herself atop him, then laid her palms across his chest. He could have flipped her over and perhaps she would let him later, But at present she was feeling selfish and wanted nothing more than his trousers off, followed by everything else soon thereafter. There was pain at first when they coupled. Lyanna grit her teeth against it, but in time it gave way to pleasure, and with that came sweet, carnal bliss. When her intended sat up, she demanded that he hold her against him, not with words but action. Slowly, gradually, she began to move in his lap, grinding herself atop him with slow, rhythmic movements, designed to delight and distract. Swallowing her pride and asking advice from Elia had proven a boon after all. For all her sass and snark, the Martell girl knew how to please a man. Surely owing her a favor wouldn't be so bad. Nathaniel kissed her neck, drawing her back to reality with a soft hum as she continued to grind her hips against his. She was neither mounting him, nor was he doing the same her, but rather they were caught somewhere between the two, delightfully devilish in their decadence. More. She wanted more. By the gods, she needed more. Some might call this foolish, that by betting one another before they were indulging in darkness she didn't care. Instead she began to bounce in his lap, short, savage motions, the better to hasten her own pleasure alongside his. Until finally she came. Her body quivered with sweet release, once, twice, thrice as she sprawled against her lover, exhaustion overtaking them both soon thereafter. Sleep claimed her most quickly as Nathaniel held her in his arms. She snuggled into him with a smile, warm, safe, and loved. Sweet dreams came soon thereafter, blessed and pure. She was still dreaming when the slaughter began. From the mist they came. Masked warriors bearing blue eyes and blonde hair, armed with sword and axe and spear alike, they strode across the water and waded into the fray with singular purpose. Notably, there were only 9 of them. No more, no less. 9. In a pitched battle alone, they wouldn't have made much a difference, but here with the Krakens hemmed in by Lannister and Stark alike. They made all the difference in the world. Time and again they targeted enemy after enemy, seeking out the commanders and any whom the invaders might seek to rally behind. It was a slaughter. Whenever an Ironborn struck one such masked warrior, it turned to smoke, only for another to take its place. They fell upon the Greyjays in a frenzy of steel. None survived. Euron Greyjay took one look at the landlocked slaughter before him and knew the battle was lost. Bit of a pity that he'd tried to warn his comrades. They hadn't listened. More fools they, magic was at work here. He should know, given he was something of a practitioner in the arts himself. He'd studied the candles, saw the signs and the portents for years now, from the moment he'd first learned of that lively Lannister lad. With his birth, the infamous glass candles had begun to burn anew. They had only grown brighter in the years since. Doubtlessly they were blazing now. After all, magic was a dangerous art. It wasn't something just anyone could learn at the drop of a hat. It required sacrifices, promise, power, blood. He could disembark from his ship, join the fray, perhaps make some manner of middling difference in the melee and die for his efforts. Or perhaps the water rippled below the boats as something stirred in the deep. It was Euron's only warning. Against his better judgment, he looked down. Something stared back at him from the deep with so very many eyes. He lost his hold on the rope with a hiss. The dinghy splashed down, nearly throwing him overboard. Time to go. He'd expected some manner of magic, but nothing like this. His oars had only just touched the water when all hells broke loose. A teeming beast forged entirely of water burst from the depths with a sonorous roar. A wicked hydra bearing 6 horrid heads and great glowing golden eyes besides. It towered over the Greyjay ships, dwarfing them with its sheer size. Was it real, an illusion? Did it matter? The survivors on land were lucky. They faced a death of sword and steel. The cowards who kept to their slowly sinking ships, those who chose safety over combat. They met a far more gruesome fate. Euron's stomach sank. This went well beyond mere magic. He'd created this monstrosity out of nothing but water and ogaturate. The Lannister lord waved a hand, and those long necks craned back at his command. Drown in your sorrow and fears. The water hydra descended, jaws ripping and tearing. Choke on your blood and your tears. Wood and flesh and steel crunched in their maws. Bleed till you've run out of years, men screamed in utter horror. Give up your honor and faith. Blood flowed freely through the water. Live up your life as a wraith. Ships shattered like twigs. Die in the blood where you bathe. Death came for one and all. Was the boy singing? No, preposterous. And yet the words rang together, rhymed with eerie purpose as he issues commands to his watery beast. Another part of the scare tactic, no doubt, but it still terrified him. Worse, the water hydra ignored him. He was but one man among many ships, his dingy small beneath their interests. Aghast, he watched the beast feast. His men died in droves, some dared to fling themselves into the water and swim for shore. It didn't save them. Euron spared one last lingering look for his doomed men and rode for his life. As he did, he cast a glance to Casterly Rock, looming large in the night. The risk was high, but the Priais was probably going to get him killed, but the reward would be well worth it. The Greyjays were finished. Maybe not this year or the next, possibly 3 if they were lucky, but it was only a matter of time now. Tywin Lannister would destroy them all, tear down their towers, salt the earth, and leave their corpses for the crows. No matter how far east he went, the man would doggedly pursue. Lannisters paid their debts. Everyone knew the song. Inspired piece of work, that Rains of Castamere. His family would experience something similar, no doubt, despite the leave they'd been granted by the crown, if one could call it that. Ha! Do as the king bids or join the lion in death. Except the lion wasn't going to die now, was he? The beast had a hold of the kraken now, had dragged it out the sea and onto land. No, the writing was on the wall now. He'd been blessed with a keen mind. It had served him well on raids and when claiming his fair share of salt wives alongside a strong sword arm, but tonight he knew strength wouldn't save him. Guile would. Wicked wit and cold cunning were one's only recourse when faced with such a beast. Victory had never been an option. They were sent here to die, and in doing so, provoke a war. How fortunate, then, that he'd come prepared for just such an eventuality. Euron plotted his course and started rowing. It wasn't easy. The tides were against him, and he knew he'd be seen on his approach. Guards shouted from above. He would be facing a wall of steel soon enough. A lesser man might have given up and rowed away, letting the current carry him away down the coast. Yet row he did, right to the mouth of the stone garden and the cavern that opened to the sea within. Guards awaited him there at the dock, 10 men strong, more than enough to subdue and kill him. And standing at their head, a lovely young woman with long golden hair awaited him, clad in a red dress, her eyes a deep piercing green. This, then, must be Cersei Lannister. She didn't look particularly pleased to see him. Then again, that might have been the ring of Lannister guards with him, each armed to the teeth. Thought yourself bold, did you? She clasped both hands before herself and clicked her tongue at him in severe reproval. Did you think you weren't known to us, Euron Greyjoy? Ah, they'd been prepared for just such an eventuality, then. The plot ran deeper than he thought. He'd been wise to come here after all. Not at all, my lady. He drew his sword for all to see, and threw it down at their feet. He was but one man, and no matter how skilled he might be, he couldn't possibly hope to best so many. I've come to bargain, he said, hoping the words might buy him the precious seconds he needed. Her brow furrowed. With what exactly? The greatest gift of all. He swung back his cloak and revealed the prize in his satchel, snatched from a Braavosi vessel he'd raided not a year hence, deep and vibrantly blue. A dragon egg. Cersei went very still. Euron Greyjoy grinned, teeth flashing in the gloom. Do I have your attention now? She was watching him like a hawk. Good, he wouldn't been disappointed if she gave an easy. He saw no signs of dragons, but he could sense them, smell them in the chamber beyond. Somehow, someway, the Lannisters had discovered a way to hatch them, or maybe it was that miracle boy of theirs. In the end, it mattered not. Regardless, the tide was turning. He was simply the first Greyjoy to see it. Why should he be loyal to the Targaryens anyway? The Mad King had father and his brothers dancing on strings. Euron danced to no one's tune but his own. The Lannister girl considered him for a long moment. And what's to stop us from killing you and taking that egg for ourselves? Ah, but he had also prepared for such an eventuality. I know the location of 2 more. Kill me and you'll never find them. Cersei considered him for a long moment. And what would you ask in return? What to ask indeed. There were so very many things he could demand, each more appealing than the last. Had he more men, he could try and take these ladies captive, and their dragons with them. But no, such a course would only see his ship swamped and him dragged down to the depths. And even should he manage to escape, he'd be hunted down like a dog and put to death. There was no sense in being greedy, not when it would spell the end of him. He would wait. He should be patient. He could bide his time. Lannisters paid their debts and Greyjoys did not sow, but Euron wasn't above sowing a little chaos. Revenge. Yes, he would start with revenge against Ares, and from there, well, who knew what might happen during the chaos of war? Euron bit back a smile as he bowed, deep and low. I wish to serve the winning side. Only until he could inevitably take everything for himself, of course. Lannister fools, by hook or crook he would have it all. They knew not what awaited them. Then again, neither did he. Naruto mowed down another screaming Ironborn with a roaring Rasengan, kicked a second aside, and obliterated a third with a vicious overhand swing of his sword. The blade did its duty and cut down the fleeing fool, but unused to such force, shattered in his grasp, leaving him clutching a broken hilt. Again, worthless. Men were dying all around him, and he couldn't even find a proper blade to endure his strength. Annoyed, he tossed it away into the mad melee and waved a hand above his head. In response, the water dragon Jutsu Hydra, he'd conjured Lash Out with all 6 of its heads mowing down a score more. There was no safety for the enemy here. Neither shore nor sea could save them. The Starks and Lannisters were going to notice his beautiful display, but so be it. Better for him to flex his skills here and save lives than to restrain the lion's share of his power. Taking the reprieve for what it was, he spared a glance for Casterly Rock. He'd never felt so alive, so fulfilled, so burning with power, and yet a faint, lingering sense of unease nagged at him. Elev got a bad feeling about this.